Hey, good evening, guys. We're back for our Friday edition of the WEATHERCAST. Kind of scrambling to put things together here, but the big news, as some of you may know, a little bit of a solar flare. I just happened to catch that when I was about to go to bed last night, and let me bring that up real quick. Bring the music down and switch over to our charts. And there is the sun over the past few days there. And you can see a little bit of a solar spot right there. And I had the sunspot written down. I think that was 2665. But in any case, whichever one it is what we call an M-class solar flare. And normally when we look at like the X-ray emissions, they look something like this. Let me move my windows around here. But you can see we have different categories, and in this case, we've got B levels. We got levels all the way from A, alpha, B to C, and then M, and all the way up to X. And X is going to be your strongest solar flare. And for example, the Carrington event back in the early 1860s, that created that all that damage with telegraph equipment, that was ranging way up here, and that hit directly towards the Earth. What we have this time around, it's an M2, so it's way down here. Not quite as intense of a solar flare, but we should definitely see the effects over the weekend. And there's a look with the... trying to see which level this is. This is probably up in the ultraviolet bands, and you can see the solar flare right there. And this is kind of leading up to the flare event, actually. Well, that's just the sunspot, and then this would actually show the solar flare. You can see there's kind of a very tighter time range here. So yeah, you see that right there. That was last night while we were doing the webcast. Let me see if I can stop this on the time of the webcast so we can see what was going on. Okay, so we're up to 14, 15Z, 16Z. So this is looking at this afternoon. Things have kind of quieted down there, but that coronal mass ejection is on its way towards the Earth as we speak. So let's run that back one more time, and I'm going to stop that right on the time of the webcast, which is 01Z. So we're running up through yesterday morning, and then we go up through the morning hours and then into midday here in the U.S., and then up toward the afternoon, and then the time of the webcast was right there. So it was going on right as we were all gathered together here, and then boom, there it goes. And one more way we can look at this, there's another detector here. You can see the time down at the bottom. This is a universal coordinated time. Let me get that going a little bit faster so you can see what happened here. Okay, this is yesterday morning. So it's coming up in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there's our solar flare. So very impressive, and we do get X-class events from time to time, so I'm going to try to monitor that, and if I see any of that going on, I will pass that on to the stream. As far as aurora activity, that mass ejection is on its way to Earth, and here's what the aurora forecasts look like, and you can get this also at Space Weather Prediction Center at NOAA.gov. And this is pretty cool because I think, I remember looking at these things about 10 or 15 years ago. You had to go to some other websites, some commercial websites, to get this data. And let's see here. This is the, let's see, 15Z, 01Z. Let me check the times here. Okay, so that's current. And you can see that a little bit of auroral activity starting up there on the dark side out over the Atlantic. Going into the nighttime hours, let's run this forward. Got to load the frames even when we're doing the webcast, even when we got a big audience here. So we'll let that load, and let me take a look at the chat, see what we got going on here. Got Sue M here, and Ryan. So spread the word. Lloyd McCarter, good evening from North Little Rock. Scattered flash flood storms all around this afternoon from about 2:22 p.m. And Justin Pulliam mentioning the promotional video. And I did try to get that queued up on AdWords just to give you an idea what that looks like when we do those AdWord campaigns. We do something like this here, and I'll usually take that promotional video and get it all set up under here. And one problem I had is they did not like the capitalization on the title, so they declined it while I was asleep today. I didn't have a chance to fix it till about 5 or 6 p.m., but we will hope for the best here and maybe get a few stragglers in. Okay, so here's what the aurora is going to look like overnight. Okay, so not a whole lot going on. Things should be staying pretty far north. This is kind of different from what it was showing last night. Okay, so we go into tomorrow during the day. And I saw a different chart that had a much different scale on that. Let me see if I can figure out where that was. "30-minute forecast." Okay, well, let's see here. I'm kind of confused because I had a chart up here that went through the entire weekend. And for some reason that's not coming up. I think they may have replaced the product. But they were showing, I believe on Saturday or Sunday night, they were bringing the aurora all the way down to the northern tier states. So that would be visible definitely from Maine, upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and North Dakota, assuming you have a nice dark sky. "30-minute forecast." Okay. Let me see if I can bring up the other. There's probably another panel I'm missing here. Yeah, okay, maybe this was it. 3-day forecast. Okay, I think we're back on track here. This looks a little bit different. Okay, so let's roll the footage forward. Okay, then I'll scroll down and give you the times here. Okay, for tonight, you can see they were trying to bring a band kind of far southward, but the KP index, which is a measure of the aurora strength, going for only 4. That's kind of a low level. When you have a KP index of 4, to really get a good view of the aurora, you have to be along or north of the latitude shown here. Or not the latitudes, but the location shown here. So basically from north of Montreal to Upper Ontario, Manitoba. However, all is not lost because we roll that forward a little bit more. More of the solar flare gets here. This is tomorrow night, Saturday. Okay, you can see not much going on there. KP index 3 to 2. But then the next night, look at that. Things really flare up 6. All the way down to the U.S. This is probably almost a 7. And you can see right after dark there. And let me verify this real quick and make sure I got the times on here. Yeah, 17th. This is going to be Sunday night. 10 p.m. to about midnight. So if you want to get a good look at the aurora, I would say if you're anywhere north of the Ohio River, north of, let me bring the band up here, I would put this at maybe a KP7 here. So we would be looking anywhere north of this line. You should have a very good shot at seeing something up north. And you can see that cuts through Boston, upstate New York, Chicago, and Omaha, and up to northern Idaho. But you can't take these as gospel, because I have seen aurora displays living out in the country as far south as Texas and Oklahoma. And you can see that's south of any KP9 line. So depending on how much energy reaches the Earth at any instant time that comes into the magnetosphere, I would not be surprised to see maybe a few displays all the way down to Kentucky, Virginia, Kansas, Missouri, and who knows, even further south. I would definitely go out. Even though I live in Texas, I would probably go out and have a look Sunday night just to see what's going on. So, yeah, definitely give it a shot there Sunday night. Let me take a look at the chat here. Switch back. David Moore says 5 o'clock, 99 degrees with 72 degree dew points at DFW. Yeah, we're running about 88 here. Sue M lost the feed briefly. Sue M says when we were showing the aurora maps. That might have been during that product load. 100% chance of rain in the Metroplex tomorrow from David Moore. Not from the Weather Service, but from him. Spent an hour and a half washing and detailing the car. Yeah, so Murphy's Law there, factoring into the forecast. Mike Estwick says, figures move to Denver and miss all the good stuff. You may still see something. And, all right, so let's head into the forecast. Okay, here we go. Let's see. It looks like a pretty quiet pattern across Texas. Most of the thunderstorms are limited to the Interstate 20 area of Louisiana, south of Shreveport, near Alexandria. Out in the southeast, also pretty quiet. Very little going on in Florida at this time. About the only area of organized showers is up in North Dakota here, so possibly a new front on its way south. And the moisture feed, that would probably be coming from the high plains, kind of like that. So we'll look for that on the surface chart. 500 millibar chart, let's see what's been going on with the patterns over the past week. We'll run this back to last Saturday. You can see we had a ridge over the western U.S. And going forward, you can see that troughing off the west coast. Developed that closed low off the British Columbia coast. And then getting up to the current pattern, we've pretty much closed off that low. We have a closed high up in Alaska. So this is that Rex block I was talking about, almost also an omega block. So you see how it's forming that omega shape right there. So a little bit of both there, a little bit of Rex and omega blocking. And then downstream, that just puts a ridge over the northern plains and zonal flow over the northern U.S. Very little change to this pattern. We also have a height anomaly over the eastern Canada area. This is the very abnormally strong polar vortex over the Hudson Bay and Labrador Sea region. The blue here is a height anomaly, so that means we're driving an unusual amount of air southeastward into New York and New England. So temperatures below normal in Quebec, Ontario, and parts of New England. But I know I've seen on the chat there some very hot temperatures in New Jersey, so it really depends on where you are. 250 millibar chart showing that ridge there over the northern Rockies. Pretty quiet, and then downstream probably a bit of subsidence over the northern plains, but not enough to keep those storms in Nebraska from firing. The center of the high over the central U.S., it appears that that's over the Rockies, probably right around here. Trinidad, Colorado, and maybe a secondary high over Memphis to Nashville right there. So that kind of forms up into a bit of an upper level ridge extending east to west. So out in the southern U.S. we have very deep easterly flow, giving us kind of a tropical pattern there. And you can very well imagine airline flights crossing the country. If you're flying from JFK, let me check my preview here to make sure I can see this. Yeah, so you're flying from JFK to Los Angeles. You're definitely not going to be flying that plane through this headwind, so we're going to see a lot of flight tracks move south and take advantage of the air south of these upper-level ridges. And likewise, the eastbound red-eyes, those will definitely take advantage of the jet stream winds and stay north. So you kind of see that we have kind of a tendency for the airlines to kind of optimize the flight patterns based on the upper-level winds. It can result in quite a bit of fuel savings depending on how you set up your route. 200 millibar chart showing that upper level high, showing probably a couple of them, one off the east coast here, definitely that one there over western Tennessee, and then the other one out in Colorado, somewhere in there. So that's keeping things shut down in the middle part of the country. 700 millibar chart showing an absence of capping, except up in the high plains right here. A little bit of advection from downslope and southwest winds. And looks like the edge of the cap probably in western North Dakota right there. Everywhere else looks pretty uncapped. Lots of 6, 7, and 8 degree temperatures at 700 millibars. Okay, there's our satellite picture. Well, a few thunderstorms in northern Oklahoma. So we're not totally breaking down the ridge there, but you can kind of see the absence right here of convection. And then to the south, you can see the anvils and the cells very slowly moving westward underneath this easterly flow. Then we go to water vapor, and you can see lots of dry air there over Detroit and South Bend, Chicago, the Quad Cities, Des Moines. Let's pull up a sounding up there and take a look at that dry air. I'll pull up Lincoln, Illinois. And yeah, you can really see that dry air. Up at about 23,000 right here. The dew points would be on the order of minus 60 degrees Celsius, which is going to be like about minus 70 to minus 80 Fahrenheit. Those are some serious low dew points. So very, very, very dry there in the mid-levels. And just a little bit of cirrus here up at 30,000 feet. And some of that dry air is making it down into the lower levels, because there's a little bit of churning in the atmosphere. So that tends to degrade the parcels, and as a result, we're probably seeing a little bit of shallow moisture there in that part of the country. In Fort Worth, we've got the deep easterly flow. Let me see if I can bring that up. Yep, there it comes. A little bit of westerlies aloft, but you can see the definite lack of capping in the mid-levels. There's that Cape Robber we were talking about yesterday. And if we try to construct a sounding with 90 degrees, we got to bring that up along the dry about like that. We take the average mixing ratio in the lowest 100 to 150. So I'm going to select that right there. I bring that up along these purple lines. This other line that I drew, I bring that up along the dry about like that. So we lift that parcel and that goes up like this. Very little cape. So just not much instability to work with right now. Maybe a little bit in the mid-levels, but the convective inhibition is actually stronger. So that's what's keeping things shut down. And you can see that the layer involving that convective inhibition, that's from at about 850 down to below 700 millibars. So you would want to use both your 700 millibar chart and your 850 millibar chart to assess the capping. And you can definitely see it this morning on this 850 millibar chart. 19 Celsius, which is about 66 Fahrenheit at DFW. That is very warm for 5,000 feet, and we've even got 70 degrees in Oklahoma City up at that altitude. Very, very warm air, keeping things suppressed. Although, as I mentioned earlier, we did get a few bits of convection going up in northern Oklahoma, so probably some very intense heating there. Okay, let's see here. Looking at northern Oklahoma, let's see, not really intense heating. Something got those storms going. Maybe there was just a little bit of depth to the moisture. Something allowed those storms to form there. Let me go back and look at the satellite. Yeah, they're definitely there. So when you're trying to find the reason why they formed, you have to kind of go back to the basics. Is there a very high theta E temperature? Is there good moisture depth? And is there a lack of capping? So basically, if you've met those requirements, there's a good chance you've got convection. So let me pull up the sounding there for northern Oklahoma, and I guess the best I can do is maybe Springfield. Everything in the atmosphere has a reason, and yeah, I do see some fairly deep moisture here at Springfield, from the surface on up to about 6,000 or 7,000 feet. So we can use this as a mixing ratio line, and that comes down to 66, 67 dew points at the surface. Bring 90-degree temperatures into the works right there. And yeah, definitely got some cape there. And very, very, very little convective inhibition. So that pretty much solves the mystery there. Okay, we don't have a whole lot going on today, so I'm not going to try to make an hour-long production out of this. We'll probably head right into the forecast, take a look at the high-resolution rapid refresh, showing those storms there in northern Oklahoma and also the upslope stuff in Colorado. Tendency of that overnight is to shut down in western Kansas, maybe hanging on until about the dawn hours. Then let's see what's in store for the weekend. And for that, I'm going to go to the NAM 3 kilometer. We'll bring up the 1 kilometer reflectivity. Well, I don't like that. That doesn't have wind fields. Let me go to composite reflectivity with precip type. That usually has some other stuff printed on the chart there. Okay, so we're good to go here. So going into the forecast for Saturday, and I will be taking a break on Saturday. Looks like a little bit of a signal here in the model for an MCS moving southeastward overnight in the Tulsa area here. By midday, things are pretty quiet, but we're starting to warm up. And by afternoon, we see East Texas lighting up there. So something coming together in East Texas, probably a lack of capping, maybe higher theta E's working their way northward. But precip chances there are looking pretty good, and I'll try to get some time lapse and show that on Sunday. Looks like we also have a boundary pushing southward. Something like that. Do you see this high pressure here? 1016 line right there over Illinois, Indiana. That's pushing that boundary south like that. And it looks like we have a new boundary also behind that coming southward. And that's driven by a 1020 millibar high over Manitoba. So a couple pushes of cold air here, and this is very characteristic of what we have in an active Hudson Bay pattern. And remember, I showed you those low height anomalies over the Hudson Bay area, unusually low pressure, low heights up in that region, and that's, of course, when you have low pressure aloft, you're going to have counterclockwise flow, which means you're going to have a component of motion southward across central Canada like that. And that means mild conditions for the central U.S. and the Midwest. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, just a series of boundaries pushing southward and piling up in a big dumping ground in the southern U.S. Then we get up to Sunday. When we do Sunday's webcast, I can see a little bit of a boundary right through here. See that little bit of ridging right here in the Ozarks? And then maybe a little bit of troughing in Texas. That's an indicator of some sort of boundary getting hung up in this area right here. So Texas not out of the woods for precip, and then that other boundary to the north looks like that also arrives. Leading edge, probably something like that, driven by high pressure over Lake Superior. So it should be a very nice weekend across the Midwest this weekend, and probably the Northeast too. We are getting a bit of a boundary also in the Pacific Northwest. You see how we start out the chart here, and we've got maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and then we get to Seattle. Okay, so maybe we got a little bit of a front here starting out the sequence. But let's look what happens on Sunday. By the time we do Sunday's webcast, much different picture. From central Nevada, all the way to Seattle, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7 red lines. So it looks like we've got a front pushing through the Pacific Northwest, making its way inland. I can see the pressure gradient right in there. So that may play a factor into the forecast in the western U.S. next week. And then we get to the end of the NAM run, so we'll head into the GFS here. And I think for this one, we'll go ahead and, let's see, what are we going to use here? I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at precipitable water. This is the total water vapor in the atmosphere through a vertical column. And you can see definitely lots of that along the Gulf Coast. You can squeeze 2 inches easy out of the atmosphere in New Orleans right now, Gulfport, Pensacola, all the way to almost Tallahassee. So let's see where all this moisture heads over the next couple days. Looks like it heads for Texas. A little bit of an easterly flow. Boundaries coming southward. Yeah, it's looking like a rainy day or two there in East Texas. Then we start drying out a little bit in the Central Plains. You can see Atlanta here with less than an inch of precipitable water. A little bit more moisture coming southward. And where that moisture comes from, I'm not too sure. I think that could be evapotranspiration. Yeah, it gets started over the agricultural belt there, so maybe that is what happens. So next week, Friday, Saturday the 22nd and 23rd, basically moisture hanging around all through the central U.S. and the Midwest. A couple fronts pushing through that area, but not quite clearing out that moisture. So going into the forecast very quickly. For Saturday's webcast, looks pretty quiet. High pressure across the Midwest. Boundary pushing down into Arkansas, the Red River, central Mississippi and Alabama. Good chances of rain there. Then for Sunday, boundary continues stalling, and you can pretty much see right where it is right there. There's that graveyard for old frontal boundaries where they go to retire. The next one coming southward through the Great Lakes. And that, I'm sure, will also get dumped down in the southern U.S. And then you can see the stronger thermal gradient up in the Pacific Northwest right there. So that's indicating a cold front coming out of the Pacific Northwest. Probably a very brisk day there for Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, and Edmonton. For Monday, the next boundary kind of gets stalled there in the southern U.S., kind of like what I mentioned earlier. New front coming southward. Then by midweek, that just continues pushing southward. Something like that, and then you can see the old boundaries down in the southern U.S. Good cyclogenesis in the high plains midweek. Continued cyclogenesis there. Looks like the next frontal boundary, something like that right there through the Great Lakes area. So above average precip through this area. The weekend of the 22nd, 23rd, boundary in the Midwest right there, kind of fed by this high pressure over Michigan, kind of creating a little bit of a backdoor front right there. Next system coming through the Dakotas and Montana, and then getting up to the 23rd, 24th, 25th. Just a series of fronts gradually sinking southeastward through the Midwest. Looks very active there. Lots of chances for showers and thunderstorms there. A little less certain in Texas whether we get precip out of this pattern here. We could be under the influence of an upper level high. And I see the GFS has backed off on the idea of a hurricane in Florida. Pretty much what Ryan was saying there. And I've gotten a few emails from Ryan, and I appreciate that information. I'll try to pass it on as I can, as best as I can. And I know a lot of you have sent a couple of videos, and I got kind of in a rush today, and I wasn't able to process those, and I apologize for that, but I will try to get those up on the webcast on Sunday. Okay, just a quick look at chat here. GO 16 had a great view of the boundary layer storms today through Arkansas and northwest Oklahoma. And Ryan's saying that the Atlantic Ocean kind of blocked off the storms there. Westerly steering wind still blasting across the Atlantic, sheer problem. And Justin Pulliam passing along the space weather message. Solar radiation storms reaching S1 level expected the next 24 hours. But we'll be watching Sunday night for the next Aurora event, the next big one. Could be some possibility for something tonight, but looks like Sunday will be the main one. Where did I pull the KP index map from of North America? Let me go back to that. There was one map I was showing where it showed the limits of what you have to be able to see. Like if the KP is 3, you would have to be up in Canada to be able to see it. This is basically just observed values, and the website I got it from is this one right here. And if you miss that, you can go back and look at the replay, and it should have that there. All right, and then the other one, that's going to be at Space Weather Prediction Center. And there's the auroras that it's showing for Sunday night. So we'll see what happens with that. It's always good to have something interesting to look at space-wise. And of course, the next big astronomy thing will be the eclipse, August 21st, the big solar eclipse. So we'll be looking for that also. Anyway, I appreciate you all watching the webcast, and hopefully you all have a good evening, and we will see you Sunday. Take care.